Well, hello there and welcome. I'm pleased you've decided to take on these lessons with me. First of all, you know, of course, that the first two lessons are going to be free. So let's get started with them. The first lesson is about expressing opinions, how to express your opinions in the IELTS speaking test. So let's get started, shall we? As I said, this lesson and the next one are free for you to try to work out whether you would like to continue with this or not. Alright, here is the crux of the matter. The goals of this lesson are going to be a number of things. First of all, we're going to learn how to expand our vocabulary in a relatively easy way. Then we're going to learn some simple expressions to give an opinion and how to use them in sentences and why we should do it that way, and to practice giving these opinions in a real life way. Now, this video is going to run for approximately 30 minutes. However, when you see that there will be places where you pause the video to do a practice run of something to see how well you can do it. So therefore, expect to spend approximately 60 minutes with this video, even though it only runs for 30 minutes. Alright, how we're going to expand our vocabulary. First of all, what you have to do, you have to get yourself a book and you have to rule it like this. Now, verb, adjective, adverb, opposite, similar. And then when we see a word, let's say we find a word and we see beauty. Let's say we see an adjective is more likely how we would see this word, beautiful. So then when we look up look up a dictionary, we will see, it tells us what beautiful means. And it will tell us that beautiful is an adjective, so we write beautiful in our little book. And then we also see that there are other words relating to beautiful that have meanings in English. So the noun would be beauty. So instead of talking about something being beautiful, we might say the beauty of this object. Verb, beautify. Yes, we can beautify our city by cutting down all the dead trees, for example. An adverb, how do we do that? Beautifully. So we put all these in our little notebook, building our words. What's the opposite of beautiful? Well, beauty, ugliness, or ugly could be the opposite adjective, or similar. What are some words that mean the same? Handsome, good looking. So you see, by just knowing one word, beautiful, we have now, without too much effort, expanded our vocabulary quite considerably. And because we know that one word, we don't have to think about the others very much. And that is certainly a bonus. So we look up beautiful. What does it mean? It says it's an adjective, means very attractive. And look, even in our dictionary it says a beautiful woman, breathtakingly beautiful scenery. She was wearing a beautiful dress. It even gives us ideas on how to use this word. Good. So we put some of these other words into our book. So that's how we expand our vocabulary, by having a book like this. This works extremely well. You see how we just add these words to it. Now, where do we find a lot of these words? For example, words that mean the opposite, or words that similar words. If you are using a program called Word, Microsoft Word, and you type something on the page, you can go up to the top to the review section of Word, and you can look up this thing here called a thesaurus. In the thesaurus, you will see there are alternative words for the one that we're using. So you see here, we typed in there beautiful in the thesaurus, and we see good looking, gorgeous, stunning, striking, fine looking, attractive, handsome, and the antonym, or the opposite meaning, is ugly. We can also see lovely, picturesque, scenic, blah, 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 blah. So we have now got access to a whole lot of fabulous vocabulary, all because we know the word beautiful. Simple? Yes, it is. So we start adding it to these things. Okay, now we're going to talk about what we have to do in the exam when we're asked to express an opinion. Opinions come pretty much in part 1 and part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam. Here are the phrases we can use. In my opinion. The question might be, how about the transport in your city? You could say, well, in my opinion, it's better to take the bus than it is to take the train. Now be careful, the examiner is waiting for you to expand on this. He doesn't want to have to say why. You have to put that why in your own answer and make sure that you answer his question why, before he says it. If you answer his question why before he says it, you will score well. So you could say, when he says, tell me about the transport in your city, you might say, in my opinion, it's better to take the bus than the train, because the bus is much more comfortable and it's air conditioned, whereas sometimes the train is dirty and noisy. Right. Now, these expressions with here, in my opinion, personally I think, I believe that, I feel that, I would say that, and in my view, they don't necessarily have to come at the beginning of the sentence. They can come in the middle. For example, it's better to take the bus than the train, in my opinion, because the bus is air conditioned and very clean, but the people who look after the trains don't take care of them. So you can see that's in the middle of the sentence. Or, it's better to take the bus than the train because the train is too dirty, in my opinion. So you see what we're saying. In my opinion. Personally, I think. I believe that. I feel that. I would say that. In my view. And this last one, frankly speaking, I suggest not using it too much because it's not in everyday use. Now, if you don't have an opinion on what the examiner asks, it's difficult to say what you might think about it. So if you really have nothing to say, it's better to express your lack of opinion and wait for the next question than to keep silent. If you keep silent, you can't get any score because the examiner does not have any way to work out whether your English is good, bad, or indifferent. So you could say things like, I'm afraid I've never been interested in football, so therefore I'm unable to answer your question really. Do you see what I did? I did not just say, I'm afraid I've never been interested in football. I've added to my answer. So therefore, I would not feel confident about answering your question. So I've used a long, complex sentence. I'm afraid I've never been very keen on art. Maybe the examiner said, what do you think about the paintings of the Flemish paintings? Right? You might say, I'm afraid I'm not very keen on art, so I really don't know much about it. I couldn't make much of a comment about that. All right. Once again, I'm afraid blah, 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 blah can always be used in the middle of the sentence or even at the end. It's very common in English to say I'm afraid about something if we don't really know something about it. It doesn't really mean that we're afraid or scared. It's just a strange expression that English speakers use. I'm afraid I don't know much about the city of Beijing, so I really couldn't comment much about it. Okay, well, similarly we could say I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm not familiar with the topic you just brought up, so I really don't feel confident in giving a sensible answer. You could also say something like, I'm sorry, I really don't know much about this subject. However, I imagine that it must be like this, and then give you an example. That's fine. You could also say, I haven't really thought about it, but I guess that scuba diving, which is something I've never tried, could be very interesting, but I am afraid of sharks and I really wouldn't like to do it. So you can see these, even though we've got some very good expressions here for starting off our answer where we need to show an opinion, they are very, very flexible. All we need to do is know a few of these. Remember, the examiner is only with you for a total of 14 minutes of your entire life. So if you don't know a lot of ways to express your opinion, it doesn't really matter. If you know 2 or 3, that's enough. So out of these, you need to pick the ones that you think are going to be useful to you, which you're going to be comfortable using, and learn to use them well. So things you need to remember when expressing an opinion. Unless you say something that's very offensive, there are no good and bad opinions. The examiner is evaluating your ability to communicate your ideas. He's got no interest, really, in evaluating your opinion. Now, in IELTS, there are 3 subjects which the examiner will completely ignore, so you don't have to worry about being offensive in any of them. The examiner will never talk about politics, sex, or religion, so you won't be asked to give any of those opinions on those sort of subjects for a number of reasons. They might be embarrassing and difficult to talk about. They might be offensive. So IELTS examiners are told to keep well away from those 3 subjects in particular. If you can, you should always try to give an opinion, even if you don't know something about it. And you should only express a lack of opinion, I really don't know anything about that, if you really feel that you can't say anything about it. You might give an example of why you don't know anything about this or don't have an opinion on this. We don't do that in my country, you know. If the examiner says something about what do you think about the idea of Santa Claus visiting children to give them toys, you might say, well, in my country we really don't have this tradition, so I really don't know much about it. However, I imagine that it must be very exciting for children to think about, you know, this strange person coming to give them gifts. All right. Instead of keeping silent or hesitating, which will negatively affect your score, you can express a lack of opinion to give yourself time to think about what to say. It's quite okay to buy time like this. I really don't know much about this tradition that you have in the West, but I imagine it's like... And don't forget, if you just answer yes or no, you will score very poorly. Expand your answer. Do you like the transport system in your city? Yes. As a matter of fact, I really do like the transport in my city. In my opinion, it's probably one of the best in the world. We have linking buses, linking with train stations, so that everywhere in our city people can access rail transport. Something like that. Okay, let's think about practicing now. This is where you're going to have to stop and start the video maybe a few times to really get this happening. And like I said, the video will actually run for up to 30 minutes, usually under, but with stops and starts where you practice, you might get up to 60 minutes or more out of a video. Alright, let's have a look. Let's use the expressions, in my opinion, and personally I think, to answer these couple of questions. Alright, are you ready? Remember, we're using in my opinion and personally I think. How can the type of school you go to affect career success? Stop the video, think about this question, answer it, and then come back and see what I have to say about this. See if it gels with what you had to say. Stop the video. Okay, so now you're back. You've practiced your answer about how can the type of school you go to affect career success. Well, my answer might be totally different to yours. However, let's just try it out, yes, to see whether we get similar. We have to use, we said, in my opinion, or personally I think. Career success, in my... Oh, sorry, it's better to take the bus than the train. My mistake. Okay, in my opinion, it's better to take the bus than the train. So we're going to say, in my opinion, how can the type of school you go to affect career success? Here's my answer. Career success, in my opinion, does actually depend very much on the instruction we had from school. I believe that with good instruction from school and a better school, we are able to open doors into employment and promotion. We think about things like the old school tie, which is a tradition in the West, where if you went to a certain school, you most certainly can do better at getting a job. And the next one, personally I think, what kind of art is most interesting? Stop the video, work out an answer, see what you think, stop the video. Right, now we're back. What kind of art is most interesting? Well, I don't know a lot about art, but personally, I think that the type of art that we have in modern times, like Japanese manga art, is extremely interesting, and it's able to be produced by almost anybody with some artistic value or talent. I really like it. Hey, how did you do? Did you get pretty close to it? And have a look at this. Let's try this one with I believe and I feel that. These are ways to express opinions. I believe that. Do people in your country prefer to read books or watch films or movies? You can stop the video and give your answer. See how well your answer works out. And then let's try I feel that, something or other, with why do you think that some parents choose to educate their children at home? Is this a good thing? Stop the video, make an answer. Okay, you're back. Here's mine. Why do you think that some parents choose to educate their children at home, and is this a good thing? I feel that parents educating their children at home is probably not a particularly good thing, because how can we be sure when they do that they are covering the complete curriculum? If they're not following the same curriculum as other students who actually attend school, the children might be missing out on some valuable education. Alright, let's move along a little bit and think about this. I would say, we can use this expression too. I would say that, something or other, or in my view. All good ways to express an opinion. Let's have a look at the question. Why do people watch television serials? Look at that. Even IELTS examiners do make spelling mistakes, so don't feel bad if you do. Why do people watch television serials? Okay, you stop the video, see what you come up with. Also, the second one, how important are role models? Stop the video. Okay, we're back. Why do people watch television serials? People watch television serials, I would say, because they do not have a complete grip on the reality of life. They probably have no excitement in their lives, so in my opinion, they watch these artificial lives on television so that they can inject some excitement into their life. The second one, how important are role models? By the way, this is a very often repeated question in part 1 of IELTS. How important are role models? In my view, role models are very important. I think the most important role model in the family is the father and the mother, because the children look to these people, their parents, for ways to act. It's not so much what people say, it's how people act that has a huge influence on children. So therefore role models are very, very important to children. Let's have a look at a few more. Now, if you really have nothing to say, it's better to express a lack of opinion and wait for the next question than to keep silent. You could say, I'm afraid I've never been interested in football. We said that before. I'm afraid I'm not very keen on art. So let's try to use those in these questions with the stop and start of the video. Have shopping habits changed over recent years, and how? Stop the video. Okay, you're back. You've got an answer. Let's see what I might say. I might say, well, shopping, I'm afraid, is something that I've never really been interested in. I get my wife to do all of that. But I believe that shopping habits have changed a lot over the years. How have they changed? For example, we now can do shopping online. We can get goods delivered directly to our house. Without having to leave our house, we can go shopping. How about this one? Has the popularity of football or soccer changed in recent years? Well, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I know nothing about soccer or football. It's not the sort of thing that I really get excited about. But I have seen with my own eyes that when there's an international match, for example, between two countries in Asia, the following is quite huge. I guess it's a pity that I really don't have an interest in it. Alright, let's move on a little bit. You could say, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that topic. I'm sorry, I'm completely unfamiliar with that topic. I haven't really thought about it. So have a look at these questions here. Why do many young girls want to become models? Okay, you can think about that and make an answer to that. Do you think the transport system in your country will improve in the future? Hey, be careful with this one. Note the tense, future tense. What do you think are the typical character traits of people from your country? Do you think all successful people are happy? So you know what to do now. Stop the video, make up a few answers, and see if they fit very well with this. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that topic. However, I'm sorry, I'm completely unfamiliar with that topic, but I haven't really thought about that, but I think blah, 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 blah. Go on. Very good so far. Here are some free practice questions for you. No prompts, so you have to decide which phrase you're going to use. Is water pollution a problem in your country? What types of sport do you think are better? Team sports or individual sports? Now you have to make up your own answers. I'm not going to help you here. I'm sure you will do very well. Stop the video, try it out, but I don't have an answer for these. Okay. Here's a few more you can think about. In what way does advertising influence what people buy? Hey, remember, practice makes perfect. What do you think is better, public or private transport? Why? Has the level of crime in your country changed in recent years? How? What are the main problems facing children in your country? Why do countries have national holidays? Hey, don't forget the pause button. Make up your answers, do the best you can, and then come back. Okay, to be honest, that's it for this lesson. Our next lesson will be on using time fillers. How to buy time from the examiner so that you are able to answer the question he asks in the proper way. Alright, but before we go, let's see if we achieved our lesson goals. Did we learn how to expand our vocabulary in an easy way? Yes, we did. We did that. Did we learn to give some simple expressions to give an opinion? Yes, we did. Don't forget your vocabulary book. Did we practice giving those opinions in a real-life way? Yes, we did. So we've achieved the aims of this lesson. Here's a little quiz just before we go. The examiner asked me to talk about a topic I don't know much about. I should keep silent, tell the examiner I don't know anything about the topic and would prefer to change the topic, or say I don't know much about this topic but I imagine it's like this and try to give an answer. Which one of those answers do you think is correct? Or the best answer under the circumstances? How about this? I will be penalised if I have an opinion that the examiner doesn't like. True or false? What did we say? So long as our answer is not offensive or our opinion is not offensive, the examiner is there to judge our English ability, not our opinion on matters. So, this would be false, of course. And what else do we have to say? Questions like, do you think rich people are the happiest? Are likely to be in which part of the IELTS exam, do you think? Part 1? Part 2? Or Part 3? Remember, Part 1 is generally simple questions to settle you down, make you feel comfortable, but asking a few questions that you should be able to answer. Part 2, of course, we'll come to that later in our course, is the one where we have to be silent, where the examiner has to be silent and we have to talk. It's pretty nerve-wracking, but when you get to that lesson you'll see how it's done quite easily. And Part 3 is where we have to give some more philosophical answers, longer answers, more complex answers. So, do you think rich people are the happiest? Is likely to be in which part of the IELTS speaking exam, do you think? I think it's more likely to be in Part 1 than any other. However, we could see it in Part 3 as well. So be prepared, be prepared. Remember, construct your answers in such a way that they complete the answer and give information without the examiner having to say why, how, why did you say that? All right, so that's all. Can you talk about these things? Just something to think about. You can stop the video anytime you like, look at these and see if you can come up with answers to these, giving your opinion using the examples we have used today. So, that is the end of Lesson 1. This is the first free lesson. There's one more free lesson before you have to make a decision. I'm hoping that you will go on with this, because I can assure you that my students who take my lessons, when they follow the examples and follow the format I give them, they do score very well in the IELTS exam. And this is your opportunity to get that same instruction that I give in the classroom, but at a much reduced rate because it's on video. You can do the lessons at home, in your own time, when you wish. Alright, see you in the next lesson. I think if you've followed this up to now, you've done well. Good job. See you soon. Okay, my friends, we've completed Lesson 1, your first free lesson in this course on IELTS Speaking. And now we're coming up to Lesson number 2. We're going to be talking about time fillers. My name is Dr. Raymond Connors. This is the second lesson in a series of 20 lessons on IELTS Speaking for Success. So, this also is a free lesson, so please enjoy and take advantage of it. So, time fillers, what does it mean? Time fillers. Well, sometimes we need a little bit of time to think about an answer to the question, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, how to do that. So the goals of this lesson are going to be to learn how to use and practice stalling by repeating the question that the examiner asks us. and how to actually ask for some time to consider the question, and also how to express a lack of opinion about a subject, something we touched on in the first lesson. And we're going to also be able to use everyday conversation fillers that people use all the time, and combining some time-filling techniques. One of the things a lot of students get really concerned about is having a huge vocabulary of very sophisticated, complicated words to use in IELTS. My suggestion has always been, and it has always worked very well, that the less complicated the vocabulary you use, the better your score will be, because it's obvious to the examiner that if you use more simple vocabulary, you know what you're talking about, and so do the people you're talking to. So don't worry about huge, complicated words to use, okay? Always choose the simple stuff. All right, so let's get on a little bit with this and see what's next in this lesson. So we're going to be talking today in the IELTS speaking test. The examiner might ask you, it could be a difficult question, and you may need some time to think about what you're going to say. So we're going to study the techniques below. You see here this man in the chair, he's sitting there and he's thinking. We can almost hear him saying, while he's thinking about the answer to a question, isn't he? So let's check out some of the techniques that we can use to stall our answer, which gives us a little bit of time to think of a very good answer so that we don't lose marks, but we still are able to answer the question well. All right. So one of the techniques we can use is to repeat the question. You can buy yourself time to think by repeating the examiner's question, and in everyday conversation we often do this to clarify what somebody is asking us. See, here's an example. The examiner might ask you something like, what different types of food do people eat in your country? Now, maybe you just can't answer this immediately, so you need to stall a little bit. But we need to know how to do it correctly. So you might repeat his question. You might say, okay, so you'd like to know what kinds of food people eat in my country, yes? And he'll say, yes, that's right. So you've given yourself a little bit of time to think about what you're going to say by repeating his question, and then you can begin. Or maybe let's have a look at another example. How does television influence children? You could also repeat this question too. Most questions you'll be able to repeat if you really need to stall. How does television influence children? How do I think television influences children? Well, it could well be that television seems to have a very strong effect on how children think. Of course, we're all aware that television can be used to promote government policies very easily, and so children begin to think like that. Also, advertising is a big influence, and so you see how I stalled before I started to answer the question, to give myself a little time to think about this. We can't take too long. We have to make it sound quite natural. We could, of course, simply ask for a little bit of time to think about it. We do this in everyday conversation anyway. So, we could say, can I think about that for a moment? All right. To my way of thinking, you see, I have stalled a little bit. I've put a pause in there, and this is not unnatural. We have to do our conversation with the examiner in a natural way. Or how about we say, can you give me a moment to think about it? I consider that blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we can see that that happens. We also could express a total lack of opinion about something, and that gives us, that is a time-filling situation where we can buy a little bit of time. For example, you might be asked something that you haven't really thought about much before. So you really do need to have some time to think about it. If you're asked your opinion on something, you can begin your answer by expressing a lack of opinion. And we did touch on that in our first lesson. What does success mean to you? I haven't really thought about that. But to be honest, our early life, when we become young teenagers or into adulthood, seems to be taken up a lot with a lot of study. So therefore, it would seem that what we study must have a bearing on the rest of our life and blah, 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 and carry on. So you see, saying that you haven't really got an opinion on something is a stalling technique that we can use. We can use conversation fillers. They're just simple words and phrases. Now here you can see that we could use well, now those three I do not recommend. Although we do use them in everyday conversation, these are not good ones, right? So we should be thinking about things like, let's see. Oh, what do you think about man landing on the moon? Let's see. I feel that the advances made by people landing on the moon, humans landing on the moon, is a great thing because, or you might say, difficult question. Or interesting question. Or even basically think. Look at this. Here's the exact thing that we just said. Difficult question. Well, basically, I think that sport can help us to live a much healthier lifestyle because, by the way, do not think that you have to speak quickly. You don't. We don't usually speak quickly in normal conversation. We speak at a speed that we are sure people will understand us. So it doesn't matter if you say things like, that's a difficult question. I haven't really given that much thought. However, I imagine... Okay, so don't be afraid to stall conversation fillers. You will probably notice that as we went along, I have been combining techniques. That means I've used more than one technique. You will remember in our first lesson we talked about how to give opinions. So of course, we're now talking about how to stall for time, to buy time, so that we can think to answer the question. So if you need a lot of time, you might consider combining several approaches. For example, here's one. What different types of food do people eat in your country? All right. We know this question. We will know what to say about this. However, it could be a surprise question. And we might say, so, let me see. You'd like to know what kinds of food people eat in my country. Interesting question. Can I think about it for a moment? Well, I guess our traditional cuisine is still very popular with most people, although lately we've had an influx of Western-style food like McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, I think generally most people in our country do still stick to the traditional types of food. And I also believe, right, okay, so I'm going on, but I have combined a number of techniques and it doesn't sound unnatural. We have to remember that the examiner is with us for 14 minutes of our life. He does not know, he's got absolutely no knowledge that we don't know any more English than what we have told him. Maybe our English is very poor. He will never know so long as we use the techniques to answer the questions and we do it competently. So let's practice some of these techniques. Do you remember how in our last lesson we paused the video while we thought of an answer? We will do that now, and I will give some of my answers too. So let's try using the repeat the question situation, such as this. What different kinds of food do people eat in your country? Okay, so you'd like to know what kinds of food people eat in my country, or how does television influence children? How does television influence children? Well, so let's try one or two. Are you ready? Here's the question. Should parents choose their child's future profession, or should children be free to make their own decisions? Okay, pause the video, think of an answer, then come back and see what I think I would say if I was being asked this question by an examiner. Pause the video now. Okay, now we're back. The question is, the examiner asks me, should parents choose their child's future profession, or should children be free to make their own decisions? Now that's a difficult question. I haven't thought much about that in the past. However, in my opinion, children should be free to make their own decisions because, after all, it is them, the children, who will have to fill that job, possibly for the rest of their lives. And because there are new jobs being created every day, such as in the field of information technology, it's probably a question that parents are not as well educated enough to be able to advise on. Okay, got it. And how about this one? Why do you think that some parents choose to educate their children at home? And is this a good thing? Do notice in such a question there are two parts to the question. So pause the video, think up your answer, and then come back and see what I thought. Pause the video now. Okay, so you've got your answer. Let's see what I might have said if I had been the candidate. The examiner says, why do you think that some parents choose to educate their children at home? And is this a good thing? So let me see. Why do I think that some parents choose to educate their children at home, and is it a good thing? To my way of thinking, some people choose to educate their children at home because they are not happy with the education system, and they probably feel that their children are not getting a well-rounded education. In some cases, this could be a good thing. However, it's also my opinion that there is a tendency for the child to not be exposed to the full curriculum as he might be at school. So I believe that parents who do this need to do so very carefully. Okay, what do you think? Did I do okay? Good. All right. So, of course, we can, as we said earlier, just simply ask for time, and that's what we're going to practice this time. You can simply ask for time. We do this in conversation all the time, don't we? You know, Mother might say, "What are your plans for today, dear?" And you might say, "Can I think about that for a minute?" "All right, well, maybe I can take my little brother to the movies because we have a day off." See, I've asked for a little time to think about it. So let's try it with these ones. What are your plans for the future? Hey, this is a pretty common one in IELTS, so be prepared for it. Do not practice answers to these things, but just know what you think you might say, okay? Nothing upsets an examiner more than to listen to an obviously well-rehearsed answer, right? So you have to do it very naturally. So you think about this one. What are your plans for the future, and can you answer it using one of these stalling techniques? Stop the video, think what you will say, stop the video now. Okay, did you do okay? Let's see, what would I have said? Of course, you might say something completely different, and that's fine. So the examiner says, what are your plans for the future? Oh, can you give me a moment to think about that? At present, I'm studying at university, and of course I'm studying information technology. So I think that my plans for the future will include something to do with information technology. I do have some idea or some thoughts about migrating to the USA at some time in the future, and I think that I should study information technology in great depth so that I'm prepared for a job in the USA in that field when I want to move there. Okay, was that okay? Okay, let's carry on. Expressing a lack of opinion. If you're asked for your opinion on something, you can begin your answer by expressing a lack of opinion, that you don't know much about this thing. So maybe the examiner will say, what does success mean to you? So you might not have thought about this a lot, or not really be prepared for this lesson. So you could stall for time by saying, I haven't really thought about that. But, so you've given yourself a couple of seconds to really think about it. Let's try one of these. What do you like about your town or city? So, stop the video, think about what you would say by starting off by expressing a lack of opinion. Stop the video now. Okay, you're back. I hope you've got an answer ready. We're going to think about this by expressing a lack of opinion. The examiner says to me, what do you like about your town? Oh, I haven't thought about that a lot. I don't really have much of an opinion on it. But I've been living here for the last 10 years after we migrated from my previous home in Vietnam. And I think, in general, that this town is pretty well serviced and it's got good facilities. La 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 la. How's that? Is that all right? Did I do okay? All right. We can sometimes use conversation fillers to fill up the time so that we can think. Of course, we talked about them before, the ones that we use in everyday conversation well, but as I suggested, try not to use them too much. But stuff like, let's see, that's a difficult question, interesting question, basically, Let's try one. What was it like growing up in your hometown? Pause the video, see what sort of an answer you come up with, and check back with me in a moment. Stop the video now. Okay, now that you've paused the video and you're back, let's see what I might say if I had been you in this situation. But of course you might have a completely different answer, and that's okay. So, the examiner says, what was it like growing up in your hometown? Oh, well, that's a rather interesting question, because I had quite a varied childhood, an exciting childhood, I would say. In my opinion, growing up in my hometown was rather exciting, really. I had lots of good friends. The facilities of my hometown were somewhat basic when I was a child. However, they have changed a lot, and things are better now. But when I was a child, we used to play often in puddles after it rained, and we played a lot with no shoes on. Mother didn't like them. Okay, we got it. We got the idea. Good. Of course, combining techniques is really the ultimate way to go. So you should consider combining several techniques. Don't forget to just get proficient with using these type of techniques. Find one or two that work for you and use them. So if you need a lot of time, use several approaches. For example, here's an example. What different types of food do people eat in your country? We've heard this question before, and we're going to get sick of it, but these are the types of questions that get asked, and we should be practiced in answering them. Okay. So you'd like to know what kinds of food people eat in my country? Interesting question. Can I think about it for a moment? Well, I guess our traditional cuisine is still popular. So you see the techniques used? Repeat the question. So you'd like to know what kinds of food people eat? Interesting question. Can I think about it for a moment? Now, okay, there's probably too many techniques there, really. However, it's to show the idea. So let's see about this one. What do you enjoy about your work or your study? So, pause the video. Think about how you would combine a few techniques to buy a bit of time, and answer the question. Stop the video now. Okay, so now you're back. The examiner asked, what do you enjoy about your work? So you'd like to know what I enjoy about my work. Now, that's a very interesting question. I've had a number of jobs in the past, but the most interesting one I've found was teaching IELTS to people who don't speak English. It was a very interesting thing for me to do because I was able to help people and I was able to use my natural ability as a native English speaker. La 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 la. Okay, very good, huh? All right. So you can use your own time filler techniques on these questions. You can stop and start the video as often as you like. I'm sure you've got the idea now on what to do. How do you think your neighbourhood could be improved? Common question. How have eating habits changed over recent years? Do you think long-distance transport will improve in the future? How healthy is your country's cuisine? Why do you think people go to restaurants when they want to celebrate something? Do people take as much exercise as in the past? Why is exercise good for you? What are the advantages and disadvantages of public transportation? You can stop the video anytime you like. Consider some answers to these using the techniques that we have discussed in this lesson. You can go back on the video and replay some of the instruction if you want to. Okay, So think back to the previous lesson where we talked about expressing opinions. So combine your opinions with time-filling techniques on these questions. Which part of your country would you recommend to tourists? What are the main health problems in your country? Do you think computer games can make children violent? What is the most difficult aspect of learning English? What are the benefits of travel? So there we go. Which country would you really like to visit? Stop the video, think of some answers, combine a few techniques, and see how you do with that. So, did we achieve the goals we set for the lesson? Did we learn how to use and practice stalling by repeating the question? Yeah, we did. Did we learn how to actually ask for some time to consider the question? Yes, we did. Did we consider about expressing a lack of opinion about a subject? Oh yes, we did. Did we think about using everyday conversation fillers? Yes, we did. And did we think about how to combine time-filling techniques? Yes, we did. We've done very well in this lesson. I think you've done well. So that's all for today. But our next lesson will be on requesting clarification. In other words, asking the examiner, what do you really mean by asking this question? I don't understand. But there are special ways to do it. Now is the time. We've come to the end of the free lessons in this section. You have to decide whether you would like to invest in your future by taking the rest of the lessons so that you can get a great IELTS score. Hopefully, we'll see you in the next lesson. Here's a little quiz just before we go. If I need some time to think of an answer to a question, I should stay silent until I can think of an answer? Or ask the examiner to repeat the question? That's possible. Or use time filler techniques such as repeating the question? We know the answer, don't we? Because we've just been through it all. If the examiner asks for your opinion on something, you should refuse to give your opinion because the examiner might not like your opinion. Give your opinion and hope the examiner likes it, or don't care if the examiner likes it or not. Just use the best English you can. It's definitely number 3, isn't it? Of course it is. Okay. The examiner will assess you on your opinion, how you are dressed, or your ability to use English correctly. That's number 3. He will assess you on your ability to use English correctly. Here's a couple of other fluency building questions that you can consider. Think about how to answer each of these. All right, this is the end of lesson 2. Decision time. Do I go on with the rest of the lessons, or is this as far as I will go? I leave that decision to you. Thank you for now, and I hope to see you in the next lesson and see your success at the end of the course. Thank you. Bye for now. Well, we're now on to lesson number 3 in the IELTS Speaking lessons on video with me, Dr. Raymond Connors. We're going to be talking today about requesting clarification when we don't quite understand the question that the examiner asks us. If you have come this far and you are starting on lesson number 3 now, this means that you have made the commitment to buy the rest of the lessons, and congratulations, because this is going to be one of the best investments you've probably ever made in your life, and you will look back on this years to come and say, I'm glad I did this because it really did change my life. Okay, requesting clarification. What to do when we don't understand the questions that the examiner asks. And that's pretty common. The aims of this lesson are to ask the examiner to repeat the question in a different way, to ask the examiner to use a different explanation. Don't worry, the examiner is equipped for this. to check our understanding with the examiner, to practice these techniques with a variety of questions, that's what we will do, and to practice answering some typical questions from part 1 in particular of the speaking test. So let's see if we can do those things in this lesson today. Are you ready? Let's go! So, in the IELTS speaking test, you are allowed to ask the examiner to repeat or clarify if you did not understand or hear something. And we're going to look at some ways to do this. This is quite okay to do this because the examiner is well aware that English is probably not your first language. So of course there will be things that you probably get a little bit confused about or don't know about. So it's quite normal and quite usual to have to ask for some sort of a clarification, or for him to make it clearer what he really needs or what he wants to hear from you. It's okay. So let's say we've got, for example here, we've come across the word exaggerate. Now you probably do know what that means. However, let's assume that you don't. So what would you say? You could request a definition or a synonym of the word. So it would be quite okay to say, sorry, but could you explain what you mean by exaggerate, or whatever the word is? And the examiner will tell you in a different way, will ask the question in a different way, so therefore the meaning of exaggerate will probably become much clearer. Or you could say, I've never heard that word before. Could you explain what it means? And the examiner will explain to you what it means. You won't lose marks for doing this. Or you might say, I'm not sure what that word means really. I would be guessing. Could you explain it in another way? The examiner will explain it in a different way because he wants to give you the best, or she wants to give you the best chance at succeeding at this exam. Sorry, I don't know what canoodling means. Could you explain it another way? Or maybe you have heard this word before, but you're just not quite sure what it means. You might have forgotten or something, or become unclear about it. That's okay, we all do that. Sorry, I've forgotten what conumtibum means. Could you explain it in another way? So, these are the ways we can do it. They're quite normal. We do it in everyday conversation all the time. And English has got so many difficult words that even native English speakers do not know all the words that some people use. We do try to use simplistic type words as much as possible. Don't fall into the trap of trying to memorize a whole lot of very long, difficult and sophisticated words, because quite honestly, the examiner will probably won't know what you're talking about. So keep your vocabulary on a simple level. Don't try to get too clever with it, okay? So, let's think. So we could ask for repetition. It might be that we just didn't quite hear what the examiner said. Some examiners mumble a little bit, don't they? So we can ask for the examiner to repeat the question. The examiner might say, "Oh, can you tell me a little bit about that little thing?" Excuse me? I didn't quite catch that. Could you say it again? Oh, yeah, sure. What do you understand what do you think the meaning of... Huh? Sorry? I didn't hear what you said. Could you repeat it? Yeah. Or it could be that the examiner speaks too softly. I'm sorry, but would you mind repeating that? I really didn't hear what you said. That's pretty polite, isn't it? That's quite polite. We can't just say, "Speak up, will you?" No, that might not create a good impression with the examiner. And sometimes we might want to check understanding. We might think we know what it means, but we're not quite sure how disastrous it could be if we thought a word meant something and it meant something completely different, and we went ahead and answered totally the wrong question. This does happen in IELTS. It does happen quite a lot. And if you answer the wrong question, you get very low marks. So you could say, "Do you mean or are you asking me about How about this? When you say exaggerate, do you mean making something bigger or better than what it really is? Yes, that's what I mean. Okay, good. By such a word, do you mean by velocipede, do you mean bicycle? Yes, I do. Okay. When you say my hometown, are you including the whole area of my hometown or just the suburb in which I lived? You see, we can ask about are we understanding this correctly? So here's a couple of examples. What is there to do in your country? When you say country, do you mean my home country or the country in which I'm living now? Oh, I mean the one in where you came from. Oh, okay. Oh, what is there to do in your country? By country, do you mean my home country? Or can I talk about where I'm living now? Because obviously I'm in Canada, and obviously I didn't come from Canada. So do you mean Canada? Or do you mean where I came from? It's quite normal questions. Don't worry about it. So let's just do a little bit of guided practice. We will pretend that you do not know what the word in heavy type means when you see these sentences, and your job is to ask for clarification using the suggested methods we've just talked about. Remember, you don't know what these words in heavy type mean. So the word leisure time. Of course you probably do know what it means, but let's assume you don't. So how will you ask for clarification of the meaning of these unusual words? The question might be, what do you usually do in your leisure time? So, let's see about this tactic. You could use this tactic. Sorry, but could you explain what you mean by leisure? Oh, I mean, it's like the same as free time. Oh, okay, got it, okay. So what you're asking me is what I usually do in my free time. I see. So usually in my free time, I like to blah, 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 blah. So you see how we have asked, could you explain what this word means? What do you mean by it? And the examiner in that case changed the word leisure to free time so that we got a better understanding of it. What about this one, role models? Let's pretend we don't know what that means. How important are role models? Well, our question is going to be about the meaning of role models. Maybe we've never heard this before. So we might say, are you asking me about the importance of people that whose example we like to follow? Yes, that's exactly what I mean, our role models. Aha! And then we answer the question. Good. So, the question might be like this. Remember, we don't know what scenic spots means, right? Can you tell me some scenic spots in your hometown? When you say scenic, do you mean beautiful? Yes. So could you tell me about some scenic or beautiful places in your hometown? Thank you. Yes, I can tell you about some scenic spots or beautiful places in my hometown. Firstly, we have a big lake in the middle of the city. Get around. Let's assume we don't know what this means, this phrasal verb, get around. You probably do. But let's assume, for the purpose of this exercise, you have no idea. Get around. Get something which is round? No, it doesn't mean that at all. So, you might think, this means how do they travel about, Okay, so we might ask, when you say get around, are you including people walking as well as using transport? Oh yes, however people like to move in your hometown, all sorts of movement. So can you tell me a little bit about how people are getting around in your hometown, including walking? Yes, certainly. The way people get around in my hometown is primarily by using the subway, because it's a big city and blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. Let's have a go at some unguided questions, and I would like you to use the tactics for clarification we have learned to find out what the words in heavy type mean. Even if you know what they are, this is just an exercise in using these techniques. When you see them, you can stop the video, think up an answer or think of a way to do this to get some clarification, and then say what you think. Then come back, start the video again and see what I had to say about it. Okay, are you ready? Here's the first one. What do you find tough about learning English? Remember, tough is the word we don't know anything about, or we're not sure about. Stop the video. How will you ask for clarification of this word tough? Stop the video, think about it, come back, see what I have to say. Okay, we're back. The question the examiner asked me was, what do you find tough about learning English? Well, I'm not real sure what tough means. So I might say, by tough, do you mean difficult? Yes, I mean difficult. Okay, so you're asking me what I find difficult about learning English. Well, in my opinion, the most difficult thing about learning English is being able to juggle all the tenses backwards and forwards. Okay, good. We've answered the question. Resort. Let's have a look at this word resort. What is the most popular resort in your country? Okay, stop the video, get yourself an answer, and come back to me. Stop now. Okay, you're back. And the examiner asked me, what is the most popular resort in your country? Resort. I'm sorry, I'm not really sure what the word resort means. Oh, resort. A place where people like to go to stay on their holidays. Yes, okay. Okay, sorry. So, you want to know what's the most popular place people will want to stay on a holiday in my country. Well, I believe that one of the most popular places is by the beach at place. What can people do to reduce their carbon footprint? Okay, the words we don't understand for sure, we're not completely certain about, is carbon footprint. So the question is, what can people do to reduce their carbon footprint? We need to get clarification on those words, carbon footprint. Stop the video, see what you would ask, then come back to me. Stop now. Okay, so now you're back. The question is, what can people do to reduce their carbon footprint? Excuse me, but by carbon footprint, do you mean the pollution that people leave behind by actually being there? Yes, that's pretty much it. Okay. So, what can people do to reduce their carbon footprint? Well, in my opinion, people should clean up after they leave a place. We should leave nothing but our footprints in a park, for example. Right, we're answering the question, aren't we? How nutritious is your country's cuisine? Well, in this case, we don't know what nutritious means. We're not certain. So, we will want to make inquiries about the meaning of nutritious. All right, think up an answer and stop the video, think up an answer and come back to me. Stop now. Okay, you're back. I hope you've got an answer. The question was, how nutritious is your country's cuisine? By nutritious, do you mean like healthy? Yes, that's a pretty good explanation. Healthy, yes. Value to make ourselves healthy. Okay, I got it. Thank you. All right. So, how nutritious is my country's cuisine? To my way of thinking, my country's cuisine or food is rather good. It really is healthy for people. And I like to think that the way we cook is very healthy. We don't use a lot of oil and we don't use a lot of additives and preservatives. Next question, what kind of landscape do you have in your country? And our confusion is over the word landscape. Okay, think of a way to clarify this word that you don't know, landscape. Stop the video. Work out something that you're going to ask and come back to me. Stop now. Okay, thanks for coming back. The question is, what kind of landscape do you have in your country? Just by the word landscape, I think that means like the scenery. Is that correct? Yes, the scenery, the things you can see. Okay, I got it. Okay, the kind of landscape that we have in my country, to my way of thinking, is rolling hills, but in the west we have tall mountains, and in the east we have a lot of flat land with a lot of beaches. Okay, we got that, yes. What TV shows do you find amusing? Okay, we know the funny word, the strange word is amusing. Think up how you're going to ask about that and come back to me in a moment. Stop the video, think it up, stop now. So the question was, what TV shows do you find amusing? When you say amusing, do you mean like funny or entertaining? Yes, both. It could be both, couldn't it? Right. The type of TV shows that I find amusing are the type that are dramas, historical dramas. I find in particular most amusing and most interesting. Okay, got the idea? I think we're doing all right here. So let's try to get some clarification on these questions by asking the examiner exactly what he or she wants to know. Now you can stop the video and read these out, for example, yourself, and work out answers for yourself. This one. What is there to do in your town? Well, we might ask for clarifications. Do you mean my hometown or the town where I live now? Or how large is your family? Do you mean my close family or my extended family? How popular is junk food in your country? Can I assume by the words junk food you mean fast food? Which sports person do you admire? By sports person, could you mean a chess player, for example? How do people travel in your country? Do you mean domestic travel within the country, or do you mean travel abroad to another country? What television shows are popular in your country? By television shows, would you include the news? Right. What do you think are the typical character traits of people from your country? When you say character traits, are you including personality traits, or do you mean what we would consider the normal sort of person or the stereotype from my country? Do you think people's lifestyles were more healthy in the past? The past. By the past, do you mean the recent past? Or probably, say, up to 100 years ago? Oh, I mean up to 100 years ago. Okay, thank you. I think people's lifestyles in the past were probably more healthy because they ate fresh fruit. Okay. And to end, let's practice using some typical Part 1 questions from the IELTS speaking exam. Don't forget to stop this video at times that suit you, and you can always go back to what we've said earlier in the video if you want some further help. Let's have a look at some of these. These are some very typical Part 1 questions from IELTS exams. Think about how you might answer these. Do you work or study? Why are you taking the IELTS exam? So up to now, we've learnt a few techniques. You can apply these techniques to these questions. Number 3. What are your plans for the future? How long have you been learning English? Do you know the people who live next door to you? Who is your favorite family member? Don't forget when you answer these questions to extend your answer, because don't wait for the examiner to say why. Tell him because, or add extra reasons. What kind of books do you read? The books I like to read are generally historical novels because I'm very interested in our history. I think it shapes our current times. Do you enjoy cooking? Actually, to my way of thinking, cooking is one of the most boring things a person can do. We only eat so that we can continue our lives. So no, I do not enjoy cooking. Do you prefer to eat in or eat out? Personally, I prefer to eat in because my mother is an excellent cook and she cooks most of our meals at home, and I know the food is fresh and it's freshly prepared. What do people do in their free time in your country? Which sports are popular in your country? Has the climate in your country changed in recent years? A pretty common question at the moment when everybody's concerned about climate change. Which subject did you enjoy the most at school? Don't forget to say why. What do you think is the best way to learn a language? So you have to give your opinion, and don't forget, because or however. So, did we achieve the aims of our lesson? Did we work out how to ask the examiner to repeat the question in a different way? I think we did, yeah. Did we learn how to ask the examiner to use a different explanation to make it more easy to understand? Yes, we did. Did we know how to check our understanding with the examiner if we're not really certain? Yes, we saw a few techniques about that. Did we get plenty of opportunity to practice these techniques with a variety of questions? I think we got a lot of questions. I'm sure it's going to take you more than 60 minutes to finish this lesson if you answer all those questions. Did we get to practice answering some typical questions from part 1 of the speaking test? Yes, I think we did. So, did we achieve the aims we set out to have in this lesson? I think we did. So our lesson is just about over for this part. We did achieve the aims. A very good job if you're still with us, and I hope you are. That's all for this lesson, but in our next lesson, we're going to start getting more sophisticated. We're going to learn how to use connecting words, very simple, typical connecting words, to make some of our answers into complex sentences. Because examiners love to hear complex sentences, and they give great marks for complex sentences used correctly. So, be tuning in. A little quiz before we go. If you did not quite understand what the examiner asked, you should say, "What?" Oh, or maybe something like, "I didn't quite get that. Could you repeat it? Could you repeat that, please?" Or should you say, "Don't ask me that"? Which one do you think is the most correct one? If the examiner asks about something that could be ambiguous, such as, "How big is your family?" you should ask for clarification by asking questions like, "Do you mean my immediate family or my extended family?" Or, "What the hell do you mean?" Or, "My family is none of your business." Which one seems to be the best one? Okay, I'm sure you've got it. When I go to the speaking exam, I should dress very casually. Or, I should wear business clothes. Or, I should wear casual but good quality clothes. I think common sense tells you which one is the correct answer there, doesn't it? Alright, some more fluency practice. Have a look at these ones. Do you think animals have feelings and rights? Some people breed animals such as dogs for money. How do you feel about that? Do you think there should be laws to protect the welfare of pets and farm animals? For example, laws against cruel treatment. Why or why not? Are there any wild animals in your country that are not found in any other country? Are there any animal reserves in your country where wild animals can live in protection? How do people feel about the protection of wild animals? What do you think are some of the benefits to humans from protecting wild animals? Okay, you stop the video and see what sort of answers you might make for those. That is the end of Lesson 3. So, next lesson we're going to go on to Lesson 4. We're going to start learning how to make complex sentences by using very simple connecting words. Good job so far. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye for now. And now, my IELTS friends, we're up to lesson number 4, where we're going to talk about using connectors to take our very limited English up a notch and make it into much more sophisticated English by a simple little trick, by adding what we call connector words. Yes, simple things like this do actually work. So, let's have a look at what we have to do. We're going to progress from complicated English in one foul swoop. Yes, we are. So, let's have a look at what we have to do. Here is a typical low-level English story. My mum is a good cook. She can cook delicious food. My mum learned that at a special college. Okay. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with this, but we can see the person who said this is thinking in 3 different stages. 3 pieces of information. Mum's a good cook. She makes delicious food. She learned how to do that at a college. What we can do, instead of using such very simple language, we can put these pieces of information all together into one sentence, therefore making this sentence complex instead of what we call simple. Simple sentences are the mark of baby English. Using connectors are the first few steps in progressing from baby English up to more sophisticated English. And which do you think gets the higher score when we are taking our IELTS exam? Yes, you're right. You can bet that the adult or more sophisticated English will score better. How can we do it simply? Let's have a look at this particular one, and we'll see how we might be able to put this all together in a much more sophisticated way and say exactly the same. Because she learned how to cook at a special college, my mum is a good cook and she can prepare delicious food. You notice a couple of things? There's only one sentence. But it says exactly what the 3 sentences of baby English said, just in a much more complex way. So, 3 sentences, 1 sentence. Which one's better? Yes, number 2, Mario with the red hat, is doing better. Both statements say the same thing, but yes, number 2 says it better. In parts 2 and 3 of the IELTS speaking test, you'll need to speak at length about a particular issue. So it's important to develop your ideas using appropriate connecting words and phrases. So study how the connecting words or phrases in bold are used in the answer below that I'm about to show you. These are all magic little words that we can incorporate in our speech without too much trouble. Okay, so this is a fairly long reply, probably longer than we would normally expect to do in our IELTS exam. However, let's say that the examiner says, how efficient is the transport system in your city? Now we might think about that and think of 3 or 4 things we could say, but we have to put it together in such a way that it's much more sophisticated. Have a look at these. Well, if we're talking about public transportation, we have many different types of transport. For example, trams, buses, trains, a metro. So, I think it's quite efficient. In fact, I believe we have one of the most efficient public transport systems in Europe. However, Regarding private transport, there are many problems. Firstly, more and more people can afford a car, so the traffic can be very bad, especially during rush hour. On top of that, we have a lot of investment projects in progress, so there are roadworks everywhere. This makes the problem even worse. But on the whole, I would say our transport is efficient. Just don't drive a car. Now you can see the heavy type here is all stuff, or all words and phrases that we add to make it more complex. Some of the most important ones are so and, therefore, however, firstly, etc. These are not difficult words to learn, but they are very good in use. So you see how they work. We started off the answer by stalling a little bit. Well, if we're talking public transportation, blah, blah, blah. And then to add a connector to substantiate our first comment, for example. And we think about a consequence. So, I think it's quite efficient. And we add some evidence. In fact, da-da-da-da. And we look at the opposite side. However, regarding private transport, there are many problems. And then if we're going to list them, I might say, firstly, blah, blah, blah. On top of that is another way of saying and, a fancy way of saying and. So, you see we've used so 2 times to get it. So we're showing a result. But, on the whole, but generally tells the examiner that we're going to say something that is probably a little bit different to what we first said. All these little connecting phrases and words do make our answer much more interesting. Can you imagine if we didn't have them? We might say, we have different types of transport. Stop. We have trams, buses, trains, and a metro. It's efficient. We have one of the most efficient transport systems in Europe. About private transport, there are many problems. Plenty of people can afford a car. The traffic can be bad. It's bad in rush hour. We have some investment projects in progress. They make roadworks everywhere. That makes the problem worse. I think our transport system is efficient. Just don't drive a car. So which one is flowing better and gives more information? I think the one using the connectors. And we have to learn how to do them. So let's have a look at some of these and how they work for us. We might be introducing one aspect of the topic, in this case the one about the public transport. So, to introduce the topic, we might say, if we're talking about such and such a thing, and then we might say, regarding the next matter, and from our sentences that we saw, listing or adding reasons. Firstly, remember we can say firstly, secondly, third, after that, then, and so on. Right? On top of that means the same as and. Describing a situation in general, on the whole, or overall. Giving an example. For example, or one case might be. To make a contrast, something different. However, but, on the other hand, conversely, modifying or correcting what you just said. In this case, it was modifying in fact, and then we give more evidence about what we just said. Giving yourself a little time to think? Well, remember stalling techniques? Talking about the result of a situation. So, therefore. All these things are pretty good, aren't they? I think so, and just think how fluent our English will become if we're able to use these. We don't have to have super long sentences. We just need to be able to connect a couple of thoughts together to make a sentence with more than one thought. That's all they're for. We do not need to overuse connectors that are slightly formal. For example, in addition, therefore, regarding, and however. If we use them too much, it doesn't sound like natural everyday speech, but if we use them once or twice in our talk, it's fine. We should avoid using very formal connectors such as furthermore, moreover, thus, and hence. In fact, I would be inclined to just put them out of your vocabulary. Some of these can be okay for writing, and we will have lessons on writing at a later stage, but in formal speech, we just don't usually use those sort of connecting words. We shouldn't overuse connectors in general because we don't really do that when we speak. Your English will sound natural. It will sound unnatural if you try to force a connector in every sentence. So don't be afraid to decide to use just one idea in a sentence occasionally. So long as you can use a few connectors, the examiner will see, yes, this candidate does know how to use more than baby English. So it doesn't have to be a long, rambling sentence with lots and lots of connectors. The examiner will think that is very unnatural. So just try to act naturally, speak naturally, but use a couple of connectors if you can. So let's try turning baby English into more sophisticated English by using connectors. We need to choose one of these short sentences, and I'll prompt you to make the sentence more sophisticated simply by using common connectors. Are you ready? We know now about stopping the video so that we can get this ready. Let's try one. Let's try the first one we see here. My mum went shopping today. Now I want you to expand on this sentence and to make it a complex sentence with maybe 2 or 3 different thoughts in it. And you can stop the video and I will come back and give you my version, which might not be the same as yours, but that doesn't matter. Alright, stop the video. My mum went shopping today. Stop the video and tell me more. Good. You're back. So did you add something to this sentence about my mum went shopping today? Good. If I was going to tell the examiner something like that, I might add something like, because we didn't have much food left in our pantry at home, my mum went shopping today and she bought me a new shirt. You see, what did I do? I put a reason at the front, because we didn't have much food in our pantry, and then I used the basic sentence, my mum went shopping today, and, perfect connector, and she did something else, she bought me a shirt. All right. How about the next one? Try the same. Stop the video, have a look at the sentence, my brother bought a new car. So after you've stopped the video and made up a sentence that you think might look pretty good with 1 or 2 ideas on it, and we'll check. Stop the video and do it now. Okay, so now you're back. My brother bought a new car. So what could we say about this? My brother bought a new car and he drove it all the way from Brisbane, Australia to Sydney in one trip because he was so excited about the new car. So I used a couple of connectors, and because. The next one is perfect for using stuff like because, isn't it? Try it. Stop the video and have a look. I like going on holidays. Tell me more. Stop the video. So you're back. I like going on holidays. Yeah, that's a pretty good sentence. We all like going on holidays, but of course, the question that people have in their mind is why? Or maybe, where do you like to go? Let's think. I like the beach. So I like going on holidays, especially when I have more than 3 days free. All right. Did I do okay? Will I score all right? Oh, I think I will. Here are some more words and expressions that you can use to develop an argument in speaking. And let's have a look at what you think they might be. What sort of things? So, living in a big city is very stressful. Therefore, I prefer to live in a small town. So we see therefore is the connector. So is it introducing one aspect of a topic, listing or adding reasons, or describing a situation in general, or giving an example, or making a contrast, or modifying or correcting what was just said, or giving me a little time to think, or talking about the result of a situation? What do you think? I think in this case, therefore, is talking about the result of the situation, that living in a big city is very stressful. There are others it could be used. Have a look at this one. Basically, there are 3 reasons why I'd like to live in a big city. So which one of the aspects down the left here is the word basically introducing? What do you think? I think, and this is my opinion, there could be more than one, of course. I think I'm describing a situation in general. I think we could be sure that we would continue from this sentence by saying something like, basically, there are 3 reasons why I'd like to live in a big city. And then we'd say, first, the facilities are excellent. And so, what about this one? On the other hand, I think there are a few important drawbacks. What does this phrase mean, on the other hand? That's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's making a contrast. When we get to writing lessons, we will find that there are some words we use in the signposting to let the examiner know that we are changing our opinion, or we're going to say something a little bit different. On the other hand, we could say, of course, conversely, but it doesn't sound all that good in conversation. It doesn't sound natural. So, on the other hand, yes, we're making a contrast. And what about concerning shopping? I think it's much better to live in a big city than a small town. Ah, well, this could be introducing one aspect of the topic, couldn't it? We're going to be talking about shopping, so we're going to say concerning shopping, it's better to live in a big city than a small town, and continue our answer. Oh, yeah, okay, probably not much. Oh, that's about all it would be, isn't it, I think. And this one, there are a few reasons why I didn't enjoy my trip. First of all, the hotel was awful. What's more, the weather was cold and wet. Well, first of all, well, it sounds like we're going to make a list, doesn't it? First of all, this happened, and then this happened, and after that, oh, it sounds very much to me like listing or adding reasons. We're telling reasons why I didn't enjoy my trip. What's more is some extra information. So that's adding reasons. Good. So far, so good. Let's have a look in general. I think the food in my country is healthy. Good. And I live a very healthy lifestyle. For instance, I don't drink or smoke. And of course, once we've done this, I'm going to ask you to stop the video and decide which the words in heavy type are doing. Crime in my city is a serious problem. Actually, we have one of the highest levels of crime in the country. I live a very healthy lifestyle. For a start, I don't drink or smoke. I think learning languages is very important. In the first place, you have more job opportunities. Typically, people in my country work very hard. Let's go back. So out of those, you can stop the video and decide what you think the words in heavy type are doing. You see, the function over here and the words over here. Don't forget, you don't have to learn all of these. You just learn a few that you think are going to be useful for you. Get familiar with them. Stop the video and decide. Okay, now you're back. Let's go to the next page. Similar exercise. Typically, people in my country work very hard. What function does this word typically provide? Despite the high cost, we decided to stay at the 5-star hotel. What function on the left does the word despite cover? I don't watch TV very often. Because of that, I'm not familiar with television serials. Because of that, what function? Right, oh, we've done that bit, haven't we? Okay. As far as shopping is concerned, I think it's much better to live in a big city than a small town. So what about as far as is concerned? What function is that fulfilling? Think of 2 or 3 connectors to use when answering each of these questions. Of course, you can stop the video whenever you like. How important is learning languages? What are the advantages and disadvantages of using mobile devices? What can people do to protect the environment? What are the advantages and disadvantages of public transportation? These are pretty common IELTS questions, by the way. And is crime a problem in your country? Do you think computer games are good or bad for children? This is a very common one. So what you have to do with these, of course, is work out some answers that you think would suit. Make sure you're able to use connectors to make your sentences into complex sentences. Why do people travel? Okay, anytime you like, stop the video. Think of as many answers as you can using the techniques that we have just discussed. What would your ideal home look like and why? Very good one. Okay, now that's all for this lesson. And in our next lesson, we're going to start on some techniques, some strategies for doing part 2 of the speaking test. And the strategies I will show you there will be sure to make sure your score in part 2 is very high. People are often scared of the part 2 of the exam because they know that they have to speak for up to 2 minutes and the examiner will say absolutely nothing to them. It's a bit scary. But when you know how to do it, you will be able to do it well. But just before we go, a little quiz. Oh, I better come. You won't be able to see about the college. In answering the examiner's questions, I should answer only yes or no, or I should use short, simple sentences only. I should use connecting words to form complex sentences when I can. Which do you think is the correct answer? I would go for number 3. Use connecting words when I can. Notice when I can. Sometimes it's not necessary. To do well in the speaking exam, I need to have a huge vocabulary, a reasonable but effective vocabulary, or good body language. Which do you think? Remember, a huge vocabulary is probably going to confuse people. Body language won't matter. So it has to be a reasonable but effective vocabulary. Out of this set of words, which set of words could be classed as connectors to make complex sentences? Jump, run, swim, sing. Next set, and, however, therefore, so. Or car, bike, truck, train. I know that you know it's and, however, therefore, and so. Of course, there's a lot more that we could use, but those are the really important ones. Here are some questions you could practice on your own at putting these into sentences with connectors, more than one idea. Have you seen any TV programs about animals? What should we do to protect endangered animals? Do you support doing experiments on animals? Why do some people refuse to eat animals? What would happen when some species disappear on Earth? Do you think it is right to keep wild animals in captivity all their life? How do you feel about the use of animals for medical research? Is it morally right to spend a lot of money on pets rather than helping people in need? What can children learn by having a pet? What can people learn from animals? Okay, try them. And don't forget, where you see or encounter new words, don't forget how to put them into your vocabulary book, where you are building a very impressive vocabulary just using simple words. All right, that's the end of lesson number 4. As I said before, I'll see you in the next lesson when we will start to tackle part 2 of the exam and show you how to succeed in it beyond your wildest dreams. See you then. Have a great day. Hi there. And now we come to the part of the speaking test that really scares people. Part 2, in which you have 1 minute to prepare a topic that the examiner will give you on a card. You get a piece of paper and a pencil to help you prepare that. and then you have to talk for up to, but try not to be more than, 2 minutes about the topic that's on the card. During this time, the examiner will not talk to you. You are not allowed to talk to the examiner during this time, except to tell him the story about what you want to tell him that's on the card. So this is a part of the exam that most people find quite frightening. However, if you are well prepared and you know what to do, and you will after this lesson, you will handle this very well. When you see how it's done, you will probably surprise yourself greatly, because it's not as difficult as most people think. So it's amazing when you know what to do, you get a great deal of confidence, and that's what we're going to give you now. As a vehicle for presenting this lesson, we're going to be using the vocabulary about cooking. Now, we all have to eat, so we all have an interest in cooking. All right, let us begin, shall we? We'll have a look at a typical Part 2 IELTS question, and then we will see how to go about it, how to analyze the question, and how to answer the question in such a way that the examiner doesn't really have much of a choice except to give you a good score. Right. So, the goals of this lesson are going to be to begin using strategies to complete Part 2 of the speaking test. And we're going to outline the need to plan this part very well. And we're going to then explain what happens in this part of the test. We're going to see and hear an answer to this part and how it's constructed. We're going to find out about how to understand the timing needed to succeed in this part of the test, and to be honest, this requires some practice. So you will be expected to do some practice to get this right. And of course, we're going to practice answering some questions and practice the procedures that are needed to succeed in this. That sounds very difficult, but I think you will be pleasantly surprised when you see how it's done. Let's have a look at a very typical Part 2 question very soon. In Part 2 of the IELTS speaking exam, you'll be given a card. The examiner will hand you a card. It will have some questions on it. There'll be more than one question, but they will all relate to the very same topic. Now, basically, you have to talk for up to 2 minutes on the topic of the card, and the examiner will keep completely silent during this time. The only things you'll hear him say is, after 1 minute of your preparation time, you may begin speaking now. Then you speak. You'll have 1 minute to prepare your talk, and it is very important that you use that time to prepare your talk very effectively. And this is what is most important about this lesson, because if you use that preparation time correctly, you'll have no problem with this. How to plan your talk and referring to your notes is the best way to score well. Some people think that they're not allowed to use their notes to talk about the topic. Yes, you are. The examiner knows that you have made notes, and the examiner is actually looking to see if you are quoting from your notes or you are following some sort of note. If you are, he knows you're organised. The question will generally, on the card, will generally ask several small questions. And here is the important point. You must address each one of those questions to get a good score. And like I said before, it's easy when you know how. You're just about to learn how to do this in a really easy way. So let's start with a typical question and decide what we're going to do with this. The question is, describe a place you have lived in that you particularly liked. You should say when you lived there, who you lived with, what was most memorable about that place, and explain why you liked it so much. Well, one of the first things that has to come into our mind is, what tense is this question? And what tense will I use in answering it? Well, you see, lived, past tense. Lived. What was, liked, The question is pretty obviously in the past tense, so our answer has to be in the past tense. So we look at this question and we say, okay, it's past tense. Now we look at how many things we have to talk about. How many do you think we have to talk about? So how many steps are there going to be in this answer? Well, place. So one of the things we have to do is make sure we mention the place. 1. When you lived there. 2. Who you lived there with. 3. What was most memorable about this place, and why? So there's 5 things that we absolutely must talk about. We absolutely must talk about those 5 things. But if you think that's all there is to talk, those are only 5 steps in this, no, you're wrong. There are 7 things we must do. 7. The other 2 are, we must introduce our talk in such a way that the examiner knows that we understand the question. So like in the writing, we usually have to restate the question, and that's what we will do. The other thing is, when we've finished our talk, we have to have a conclusion. Let the examiner know we've finished. Wow, now that sounds pretty difficult, but let's see how it's done. The examiner will give us the card, and then he will give us a piece of paper and a pencil, and he will say, you will have 1 minute to prepare your answer, and then I will ask you to talk for up to 2 minutes. And then he will say, your preparation time begins now. And the clock will start to tick. This 1 minute before he asks us to talk is the crucial part. Let's see how we plan it. We've got our piece of paper, we've got our pencil. Right, so the first thing we know we have to do is we have to restate the question. And we do that by saying, I want to tell you about whatever this is. So we would say, we'd try to restate the question, but in a slightly different way. I want to tell you where I lived that I particularly liked when I was young. Okay, the examiner says, this candidate knows what the question is about. This part is very important. You can say, I would like to tell you about, I will talk about, let me tell you about, I've been tasked to speak on a subject of, blah blah. Okay, we don't need to put this in our notes because we know we're going to have to do that. But we do need to start thinking about how we're going to plan the rest of it. So this is what I do and what I suggest to my students, and if you do this too, like every other IELTS student I've ever had, you will do well in this part if you follow this plan. Some people like to make a spidergram, which is what I'm going to do. Some people like to make notes in bullet point form, ... Whatever way works for you is what you do. Remember, the notes that you make on this do not form part of your answer. So, the examiner never wants to really know about them, but he would like to see that you are making notes. So the first thing we have to talk about is, as I said, a place. So I put in the center of my paper the place. Maybe I would put the name of the place or what it is. My grandfather's house, my family's dacha in Siberia. And then we know we have to talk about one other subject. Who? They don't have to be. We don't have to put them in the order that they're in the question, as long as we put them all. Who? We know we have to put when. We know we have to put what was memorable about this place. And we know we have to say why we like this place. That's all part of the question. So, and then at the end, we're going to have to say, or to wrap it up. Now, if we just said, I want to tell you about a place that I particularly liked when I lived in it. It was my family's dacha in Siberia. I lived there with my mum and dad in 1989. It was memorable because one year we got snowed in. I liked it because it was fun there. Yeah, fine. 40 seconds, maybe. We need to talk for up to 2 minutes. So, instead of just the bones of our conversation, now let's think about what else might I say about each of these places. Well, about the place, I might want to say what country the place was in. I might want to talk about its location, where it was. Where exactly is this place? Because if we say the place was Chuman in Siberia, a lot of people might not know where that is, so we have to talk about exactly where that is. When? We don't have to talk about years, we just have to talk about a time in our life. During my childhood, when I was at primary school, or just after my brother got married. Whatever, just the time. When? When is non-specific, really. My childhood. You might want to say more about your childhood, so put another little balloon there. I went to school there during my childhood, right. Who? Well, maybe you lived there with your parents, so put my parents. Say something more interesting about your parents now. My parents are retired. You might want to say a little bit more about your parents too, like what were their jobs or something like that. Or you might say that you lived there with your brother too. You might want to say a little bit more about your brother. Remember, if you put a lot of stuff here on your mind map or your spidergram, it's better than not having enough to talk about. If you don't talk about everything that you put on it, it doesn't really matter. Why was this memorable? In my case, I will say there was a long staircase there when I was little. Why do I remember that? Because I was afraid I'd fall down the steep stairs. And then I might also talk about a swing that was outside in the garden. And my father made it and hung it in a cherry tree. Right. So you see how my story is now getting well fleshed out. Why did I like it there? It had some happy memories for me. And I played there a lot with my friends. Hey, it doesn't matter what language you put these notes in or whether you just put little drawings or whatever, so long as you understand what you're going to do, what you're going to say. And then, of course, to finish it off, we're going to finish it off by the conclusion, by saying that's my story about a place I really liked living in. I hope you enjoyed hearing it. Okay, So we've got our plan made up. We know what we're going to talk about. It's now only a matter of going around each of our little things, that notes that we've made here, and you can be sure the examiner knows what you need to be talking about, and he will be having on his piece of paper, tick, did he restate the question, tick, did he talk about the place, tick, did he talk about who was there, tick, did he talk about when this happened, yes, did he say why it was memorable, tick, did he say why he liked it, and did he conclude his talk. And if he's ticked all those boxes, even though it might only be a mental tick, there's not much he can do to mark you down, unless you use really poor English. So let's see about doing this, shall we? We'll say that let's suggest that the examiner has given me, I'm the candidate now, has given me the card. I've looked at the card, he's given me a piece of paper and a pencil, and he said, you now have 1 minute to prepare. So in that 1 minute, I make my spidergram. And then comes the dreaded time that everybody's scared of, when he says, you may commence your talk now. So, thank you. I would like to tell you about a place that I lived when I was a child, and I really, really liked it. The place was a little town called Laidley. This is a little town in Australia, in the Lockyer Valley, which is about 60 kilometres west of the capital of my state, Queensland, Brisbane. I lived there with my grandparents during my childhood. I went to primary school when I was there, and I made a lot of friends at school there. I lived there also with my grandparents, but also with my parents, my mum and my dad. They're retired now. My father was an electrical engineer, and my mother was a police officer. I also lived there with my brother, who followed my father into electrical engineering. And he's quite successful now, and he's now living in Canada. This place was very memorable for me. I have good memories of this place, but some of the memories are not particularly good. There was a long staircase in the house, and it scared me a lot because I was quite small. I was always afraid I might fall down the staircase. But some of the good memories are that outside there was a swing, which my father made from an old tyre and some rope, and he hung it in the cherry tree, which was out in our garden. Played on that a lot. I like this place very much, and when I think about it now, I look back and I have really happy memories. I played with my friends in the garden of this place, had my friends over quite frequently for fun, and the swing I talked about, we really enjoyed it. So that's my little story about a place that I really liked living in, particularly when I was young. I hope you really enjoyed it, and thanks for listening. So, will the examiner tick all the boxes? Well, I did start off well, didn't I? Yes. Did I talk about the place? Yes, I talked about where it was, everything. When I went there? Yes, I talked about my childhood. Who I lived there with? Yes, I talked about my parents, I said something, and I lived there with my brother. Why was it memorable for me? Well, I was scared of the long staircase, and I really liked the swing that my father made. Why did I like it? Well, it has very happy memories for me. And then, did I conclude? The examiner has put 7 ticks. And unless my English was particularly bad, I'll get a good score. Right. You bet I will. Okay, so it's over to you now. Of course, you might want to stop the video and might want to go back and make a copy of something like this so that you can see what to do. That's fine. Now have a look at this one. Here's another one. Talk about a dish you know how to cook. You should describe what the ingredients are, how it is cooked, any other preparation you have to do, and say if you think this is an easy dish to cook or not, and why. What I suggest you do now is pause this video, make yourself a spidergram. Remember, open your conversation, talk about the dish. Don't forget to say what the ingredients are or what's in it. Say how it is cooked. Is there any other preparation? And is it an easy dish to cook? Why or why not? And a conclusion. Give it a try, and we'll come back in a moment. Stop the video now. Okay, so now you're back, and you have been practicing answering this question. You need to be able to talk for up to 2 minutes. Don't forget to time yourself. Over 2 minutes by a few seconds is not a problem. Under 2 minutes by a few seconds is not a problem. It's about 2 minutes. Right. So, let's see what somebody else said about this. Here it is. I'm going to describe a dish I cook all the time. It's called chicken jalfrezi. So, did she open up by restating the question? Yes. She said, I'm going to describe a dish I cook all the time and what it's called. Now, the examiner's looking for ingredients. It's made of chicken, chopped tomatoes, onion, garlic, green chili, and some Indian herbs and spices. So yes, she talked about the ingredients. Next, the examiner's thinking, is she going to tell me how it's cooked? To make this dish, I first chop the onions, garlic and green chili. Next I fry them in a pan with the Indian spices. Then I add chopped tomatoes and simmer everything for about 20 minutes. Finally, I add cooked chicken and chopped coriander leaves and simmer for another 10 minutes. How's it cooked? Yes. Then he's thinking of the preparation. When the dish is ready, I usually serve it with basmati rice or naan bread. Yes, tick. Do you think it's an easy dish to cook? I think this dish is very easy to make. But if you want to make it in the traditional way, it takes more time and it's a bit more complicated. I don't think much time for cooking. I don't have much time for cooking, so I make it the quick way. So, the only thing that's missing, really, is a strong conclusion. The rest is pretty good, isn't it? So, that's the sort of thing we have to do. Now over to you. You think about this. Can you make this one? Describe a typical dish from your country. You should describe what it looks like, what it tastes like, when people usually eat it, and say if you would recommend this dish to a visitor. Stop the video, make your mind map, and see if you can speak for approximately 2 minutes on this following your mind map. I'll come back in a moment. Okay, so you're back. Now, of course, being a video, I can't ask you to tell me what you said. But let's have a look at some of the points that you should have covered. Let's say you have to have your mind map good and follow the time. So, basically it works like this. Did you do these things? Did you restate the question? Did you say, I'm going to tell you about? Did you say what the dish is? My dish is noodles. Did you say what it looks like? It looks like a bowl full of worms, right? Did you say what it tastes like? Well, the taste differs depending on what sort of soup we make with our noodles. Did you say when people usually eat it? Oh, this is the type of dish that people usually eat for lunch when they're in a hurry because it's quick and easy to prepare. Did you say if you recommend it? Oh, yes, if you're in a rush and you want something nutritious and quick, I recommend this is a very good dish. And did you close your presentation by saying something like, this is a very special dish from my country, and I'm glad that you got to know about it? Well, if you did, if you said all those things, you should score well. So long as your English was reasonably good. It doesn't need to be perfect, it needs to be understandable. So, this is a very typical Part 2 question. So look for some cooking vocabulary and add it to your notebook. Words like simmer, fry, boil, roast. Things like that. In most lessons from now on till we're finished, we'll include an exercise on Part 2 of the speaking test for you to practice. Because practice makes perfect. And in this part, Part 2, to make sure that you can prepare your speech on paper within 1 minute 60 seconds and then speak about what you have planned for up to 2 minutes does take practice. Don't think you can do this without planning. People who do it without planning generally get a very poor score. If you plan, you will not miss any point that you felt you should have talked about. Okay, so how did we do with our goals for this lesson? What do you think? Did we start to use strategies to complete Part 2 of the speaking test? Yes, I think we did. Did we outline the need to plan this very well? Yes, I really did make a big point about how you must plan this. Did we explain what happens in this part of the test? Yes, we talked about how the examiner gives you the card, gives you a piece of paper and a pencil, and then he's quiet after that, right? Did we see and hear an answer to this part? Actually, we saw two. Did we get to understand the timing needed to succeed in this part of the test? Yes, and we have to practice the timing. Did we practice answering some of the questions and practicing the procedures needed? Yes, I asked you to do that. And if you've done that, all we can say is, very good job. We're nearly done now. So we're going to go on now. For our next lesson, we're going to continue more on Part 2. We're going to hear a lot about these Part 2 exercises now, and it's going to be on describing people. This also is a very important lesson because describing people and places generally has been asked in something like between 70 to 85% of IELTS questions over the last 20 years, and there's no reason to think that they wouldn't continue this trend. After all, IELTS is an extremely conservative exam, and they're not likely to change the procedure that has done them so well for the last 25-30 years. So that's what we're going to do in our next lesson. And here's a little quiz just before we go. In Part 2, I will have time to prepare my answer. During this time, I should look around the room thinking. I should make a mind map of what I want to say, or I just wait until the examiner tells me to start and say whatever comes into my mind. Well, we all know that we should make a mind map of what I want to say. Hint, start on that as soon as possible. In Part 2, the examiner will enter a discussion with me, or will expect me to talk alone, or he will leave the room. Well, he will expect you to talk alone. Get used to it. To be sure I score well, I must make up the answer as I go. Don't worry about notes. Follow the points in the question plus an opening and closing statement, or use a lot of slang words. We know it's follow the points in the question plus an opening and closing statement, and we know we're going to get all those by making our plan. That's the end of lesson number 5. See you in the next lesson, but here are a couple of other questions which are not necessarily Part 2 questions, but Part 2 question is usually followed up by a few other questions, such as these. Is there any situation in which people are right to disobey the law? Do you think that people obey the law all the time? Remember the strategies we talked about before. Do people like being a policeman in your country? What qualities should a police officer have? And why do some people prefer to be a lawyer? Practice answering these too. I'll see you in the next lesson. If you're still with us, you're doing well. Good job.